Welcome to the Monomoy Regional School Committee for Thursday, September 26th. And I am calling the meeting to order. And the first item for business is approval of minutes from September 12th, our last meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? I guess I jumped that. All right, anyone opposed? Abstaining? All right, the minutes have been approved. Now we will move to public comment. Anyone from our public would like to speak? All right, seeing no one, we're going to move to our student representative, Jamie Buffington from Monomoy Regional High School. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jamie, and it's nice to meet all of you. I'm a senior here at Monomoy, and it'll be my pleasure to be your new school committee student representative. Yay. While we've only been in school for a few short weeks, there seems to be no shortage of events happening. Tuesday, September 3rd, the student body stepped back into school, already missing our friends in the class of 2019, but ready to begin learning once again. The class of 2024 has now entered the high school, a group of kids excited for their future, but nevertheless nervous about their new environment. Miss Burton's Peer Leads class, a group of students anxious to make a difference in our school, met individually with these 8th graders. They served as tour guides, mentors with helpful advice, and most of all, as friends wanting to ease any worries the new students might have. On the first Friday of school, the student body adorned themselves in white, despite the wind and rain, and made their way to cheer on the football team at the first game of the year. While the Sharks fought hard against Carver, we lost 24-6. The following Sunday, Monomoy's athletes attended the Harwich Hometown Parade, throwing out candy, dressing up in a shark costume, and demonstrating our school spirit for the community. And on Monday the 9th, field hockey defeated DY, the state champs, scoring 2-1 victory. And then on Wednesday, field hockey played a very exciting game against Nauset Warriors. Students, Rough Rider alumni, and Nauset spectators filled the stands to see this matchup. Our girls were ecstatic to bring a 4-1 victory home that night, with goals scored by Caroline DiGiovanni, Carly Dimmick, and Holly Evans. Soccer matched up against Sandwich that Tuesday, fighting hard but losing 4-3. They tied against Sturgis East on Thursday here at home. Many students came to support our boys wearing red, white, and blue. For girls soccer, the Sandwich Knights won over Monomoy 1-0. However, they redeemed themselves with a 5-0 victory against Sturgis East later that week. Boys golf traveled all the way to Nantucket the second week, but lost to the Whalers 130-72. Cross country lost to DY, but brought home a win against Rising Tide 31-21, with Ryder Robbins and Stephen Young coming in first and second overall. On Saturday the 14th, many seniors put on their best outfits and made their way to Lighthouse Beach to take their senior portraits with Life Touch, which will be in this year's yearbook. And later that day, our football team played down the road at Cape Cod Tech, scoring a 14-6 victory with touchdowns caught by a senior, Elijah Beasley. Boys soccer lost that day in a non-league game to Barnstable 4-0, and girls soccer also played that Saturday but lost a hard-fought game 2-1. Field hockey opened the next week for sports, but lost a non-league game against Sandwich 3-1. Unfortunately, boys golf also lost to Nauset 6-0. But on Tuesday, everyone dressed up and said cheese for their school photos, and then on that afternoon, all sports brought home the gold. The boys and girls soccer teams bounced back with victories over Falmouth Academy 4-1 and 2-0 respectively. Golf won against Cape Cod Academy with Matthew Smeltzer, Grady Howell, and Josh Poitras leading the team. On Wednesday the 18th, during our Jocelyn period, we held a club fair in the gym where students faced the struggle of choosing from over 20 clubs to sign up for. Students had choices like mock trial, key club, French club, and so many more. And then on that same afternoon, the field hockey team won against Sturgis East, 2-0. And ending on a great note for sports, a big congratulations goes to the Unified Track team and Mrs. Grogan for becoming an official Unified Champion school. On Thursday the 19th, we had curriculum night, where parents were to follow their kids' schedule, meet teachers, and get to know our school better. And thank you to National Honor Society, who served as school ambassadors, serving as guides and being here to answer all the parents' questions. On Friday the 20th, Miss Burton, Miss Casey, and the Peer Leads class hosted a new student luncheon, where they ate, chatted, and got to know our new Sharks. And this class continues to go above and beyond to make our new students feel at home. On Friday, all across the world, people participated in spreading awareness on climate change, protesting in an international climate strike. Monomoy's very own Nick Blue, Alice Murphy, and Audrey Smith took part in this at the Cape Cod Commission in Barnstable Village. It is amazing to see Monomoy students already trying to make a difference in our world. And finally, Monomoy lost a tough game to Nauset on Friday, and despite this loss, our student section proudly cheered on our team in a positive sportsmanlike manner. And now with homecoming on the horizon, college applications being sent out, and many more games to report on, I have no doubt that I will have an exciting report on all the latest happenings next meeting. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you very much. Any
Good job, Jade.
comments? Questions? Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we're moving now to recognitions. Dr. Carpenter?
I believe we have none in the packet.
Ah, all right. Now we're moving on to reports and discussions, beginning with our regional agreement. It's in your packet, the regional agreement. Nancy, do you want to take the lead on this, or?
I can. There really isn't anything different from the last time we voted the regional agreement. I didn't do all of this, just so we're clear. This was done by Lee, I believe, last year. Just cleaned up. There's a couple of had to change the section identifications because we lost some and they shifted. So there was no major changes from the last time. I had a question on page of the red line version, page 9, which is why that's gray, is whether or not that section is really still needed. But it's no harm in keeping it. It's mostly about the transition time, dealing with the facilities before we created the high school and the middle school. So that was my only question about what we voted on last time, after I read through it about 20,000 times, checking it.
Okay, so your question is whether or not we need it. Does anybody have a comment regarding that? Or any other comments regarding this document? Yes, Sharon?
I would just say that at this town meeting time, it might be good to leave that in if we have any question at all about it, and change it another year if we want to take more out. Just my thoughts.
Okay. So Sharon, you're suggesting that we keep it through the next town meeting. Okay, we'll make a note of that. Because we're not voting on it, I guess. We're going to do a timeline. What's our next?
My ideal would be this would be our first review, and then our next meeting would be a vote.
Okay.
Knowing that there are 2 members absent because of curriculum nights, it's not essential that it gets voted on at the next meeting. So if there is enough discussion that we want to make sure that we have a full board here to have that conversation, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay. So, so then the next meeting, we would have another review, is kind of what you're saying, because we're missing 2 people to have more of a
If you
discussion?
feel like it's necessary. And then also, I guess you could also say, if we plan on a vote at the next meeting, and yet there still seems to be some hesitation, we could put the vote off to
Okay.
the second meeting in October.
Okay. What does everybody think about that? Anybody want to weigh in? Or whether we vote on this next meeting, or do you want to push it off and have a discussion? Sharon?
I just think that in Harwich, because for some reason, I'm not sure I know what the reason is, that people had trouble with this, more time would, if it doesn't make any difference, would be better. Because then we will have brought it up and brought it up for anyone that might have any issue.
Okay. Anybody else? So, I guess we don't really need an official vote, but is everybody comfortable moving this? We'll have another read at the next meeting and then a vote at the meeting after that. Is everybody okay with that? That way Meredith and Jackie can weigh in.
Since this is the first reading, could we maybe suggest to have it as a vote just in case?
Okay.
And that way, if there is a storming of the gates, then we could say, all right, we'll have another first reading. But I think that, again, we're not substantially changing anything in this regional agreement. There's nothing about elementary schools being changed. There's nothing about future possible changes. It's purely cleaning up the interim language, and before the middle school and the high school were solidified language. So if my ideal world, which I like to live in, is that we would vote at our next meeting unless, and I'm kind of looking at it as if Meredith and Jackie come back and, really have something burning on their minds, because I did give this to you guys almost a week ago. I'm not sure if I gave it to you last Thursday or Friday. So I would assume that everybody here had plenty of time. So in my mind, it's kind of if Meredith and Jackie need or had something to bring up, because.
Yes.
Just a comment to Nancy, I've scanned it. On page 9, the gray area, I think a couple minutes ago, you said at some point that probably is not necessary to stay in and we could wait a year. If there is something, I'm just suggesting, as we move towards our next meeting, that everyone thoroughly read that, and if in fact, I don't see any purpose in waiting another year if we all feel that this is cleanly being eliminated, this paragraph. So I would make the suggestion as we review it, specifically page 9, that we come prepared to pro or con, because there's no need to just wait a year if we're just treading water about the logic of that. I'd say just let's vote it out if it's not necessary.
Okay. So, because we're going to have a discussion anyway before the
Right.
vote next time, and so if we determine that, we can move it on. So that's fine. I mean, how does everybody feel about that idea? Good?
That's fine.
All right, so we'll,
I guess
Yes.
the one question I might have is on page 9 under the debt, number 2 debt service. Do we want to have sort of a line that was scratched out lawyer's language that never really was in the, so it's like we're
Oh,
lining
as
out-
the, I'm sorry,
We're lining out something that never.
was in the
really was.
original. Yes, I think you're 100% correct there, because that was not in the original regional agreement, and therefore it shouldn't be in the red line regional agreement, because the red line is from the original regional agreement.
Right, so
I agree.
I think that one section should go, we should go back to what the original
Mm-hmm.
language is and make the modification on that, not the modification on
Yeah.
lawyer's suggestion that
I can do that and clean that part out.
next.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, clarifications? So Nancy, thank you for taking that on and cleaning this up a little bit. So we'll bring this document, the agreement, back to the next meeting, and we will have a discussion, followed by a vote if we feel that we're ready for it. So, perfect, thank you. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is Harwich Elementary School MCLP after-school program.
As I had mentioned at our last committee meeting, we have been talking with the YMCA about potentially transitioning and taking over the after-school program and summer programs at Harwich Elementary. In our conversations with them, we were sort of looking out into the horizon. Last year when we were chatting with them, thinking that at some point Ann Emerson might retire, and on the transition of that, might that be an opportunity that could provide for a seamless transition. Little did we know that that seamless transition was going to come a lot sooner than we thought. So, so we've launched into running the MCLP after-school program at Harwich Elementary this year, and we have got a number of wonderful staff that we hired new for this year. Some of the folks that are working for us in the after-school program have been doing it in the past, so there's, there's some institutional knowledge there too. But we also have continued to have conversations with the YMCA about, when might be an appropriate time, to transition. And one of the things that I told the director of the YMCA, I said, as a school administrator, the thing that seems to always happen to me is people walk into my office with a monkey on their back, and they take the monkey off their back and they put it on mine. And I said, the last thing I want to do is to say, look, I have this challenge. I'm taking the monkey off of my back and putting it on you. So let's go and think about a timeline that would work, would work for you. It's like we're up and running. We can run it through the school year. We can transition mid-year. Just whatever might work with your folks. So we had a long chat, and they have determined that the first week in November we could do a transition. So so we talked with them about what the rates would look like, and so I have included in your packets sort of a comparison of what the fees and rates are that families are currently paying with MCLP, and the discussions that we had with the YMCA. The long and short is, for virtually every family that we serve, it's going to be a cheaper cost with the YMCA administering the program than MCLP. We met yesterday with the staff. The staff, as we've been hiring them, most of them understood that we were, sort of looking at a transition, and we were hiring them at a rate that the Y pays staff. And I met with our staff and said, look, we've been hiring quality people. The YMCA is interested in having you continue with them. So I anticipate when it comes to the program and staffing, the families and kids will see the exact same people that are there this week will be there in the transition as we go into November. We're going to have a parent forum on Tuesday when I get back, and right at the end of the day for the MCLP program, and discuss with the parents the transition. We'll share with them the rate information, and folks from the Y will come and do a little presentation about what the program will look like. But as I said, for all intents and purposes, it's going to look very similar to the families. I think what the Y would like to do, and I actually think it's a great idea, instead of having all 90 kids in one space, they'll use the staff. They tend to staff programs at a lower student to staff ratio. So a 10-to-1 ratio as opposed to a 13-to-1 ratio. So they're going to try to take the program and have sort of older kids, younger kids, and sort of move them around in the building, rather than have 90 kids converge on the cafeteria. So I think it'll be a more conducive way to go about it for the kids each day as well. But we'll have a chat with parents on Tuesday. The Y will do a little presentation, and I've asked the YMCA to come to our next school committee meeting to provide you the exact same presentation that they are providing for the parents. In terms of our school district's bottom line, this is a completely sort of neutral shift. We have, with MCLP, we offset half of a custodian's salary, is what sort of we take from the funds that are coming in the door from for MCLP. But we also have a liability for up to 3 benefits packages that have been charged against the general funds of the school district. What we're, we've been lucky in recent years that that 3 benefit package liability has only been 2 individual insurance plans instead of 3 family plans. So, but 2 individual plans is just about, the district's cost of that is just about, equal to that offset that we have been having for the custodians. So, so I think financially for the school district, it becomes sort of a wash having the Y come in for our bottom line. If anything, we're sort of protected from having to pay 3 family plans in terms of the benefits.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions, Nancy?
If I remember correctly, at our last meeting, Mary spoke about how, so currently and traditionally in the past, MCLP provided the after-school care as well as the enrichment clubs at
Right.
Harwich Elementary. And so what we're trying to do is separate the club and enrichment offerings from the MCLP program. So this would be ideally just a YMCA after-school care, and then they would do their own sort of activities?
For this year, yes, and I think in terms of trying to make this a manageable transition for all, on the school side, we'll continue to run the sort of enrichment clubs
That
for this year.
MCLP used to do?
Right, so,
Okay.
so all those clubs are gonna still happen this year, and we're managing that on the school side.
Okay,
I suspect if we look towards next school year, they'll be managed on the Y side of this, but, but this, the clubs will still be there.
okay. I've
Yes.
the numbers part didn't make sense in my brain. So when MCLP was run, the money that came in from the program that we received, that paid the salaries
So that-
as well as the custodian?
So that paid the salaries and half of a custodian. But the district did not charge the benefits for the employees
To the
to
MCLP
MCLP. The benefits came out
of the
of the
districts?
district's bottom line.
So the MCLP program, or the Y program, is no longer, well, the district, even though the MCLP teachers were district employees, their money, their salary came from the receipts from the MCLP.
Correct.
So we're not getting those receipts, but we're also not having to pay their salaries. And so on top of the salaries that we were paying out, the district had to cover the benefits because MCLP didn't make enough to pay for their benefits packages.
Right.
Okay. And then the custodian is the same?
So, so.
I'm sorry,
so
you did say that
I think-
part and I
I think the way
lost
to
it.
look at it is financially, in shifting from MCLP to the YMCA, we're gonna have to absorb that half the custodian salary,
Right,
but we have no benefits packages.
right, that's what you said,
You know,
okay.
So.
Okay, so it's
and
about
as-
the
and
same,
as I
it's
said,
cost neutral in the sense
Yeah,
that
two individual benefits packages
was
is
about
about
the same.
half a
in
custodian
okay.
salary.
Thank you. I got it.
But we also have the potential out there that all 3 MCLP staff
Could
have
have.
had family packages that could have been significantly more than half a custodian salary.
Well, that's a could've, would've, so
Yeah.
we're, the bottom line is that the 2 benefits packages are no longer being paid, and instead we're paying the custodian, so it's the same
Right.
outlay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about this? All right, and thank you, I just want to thank you for this. This is
Mhm.
quite helpful to see the cost comparison. And just for anybody that's interested, this is just available, we can provide this, is that, okay?
Right, and the families will get,
At this
we'll
meeting?
get this along with a rate sheet and a parent handbook.
Okay,
One of the things that, that I put on that sheet, there's a $50 registration fee. And the way I look at it is those families that have already registered paid $50 to us, so we'll be shifting that to the YMCA to cover their registrations. It's not fair to the families to go and say, oh, you registered with us, now register with them. So we'll do that for this year.
Okay. Any other, everybody good? All right. So let's move on to subcommittee reports, BOS liaison report. So coming back to, this would be me again, Board of Selectmen conversations, and again, this is with Harwich, conversations I've had. I had brought this up last meeting and just wanted to come back with a few highlights from the conversations. The Harwich Board of Selectmen are all in agreement that they like the idea of us coming and presenting, and one of the proposals from the chair, actually, he had recommended that we do it monthly, and he could add another meeting as stuff came up, but to have a monthly presentation. That was his suggestion, just because their agendas are quite packed like ours are sometimes. The other was a community forum on the budget. I know we've talked about 3 forums. That was part of our goals, our subcommittee goals. But it was asked if we could have a community forum specifically on the budget and allow people to come and ask their questions and get, some things clarified. And then a presentation. Oh, the other thing too, and I believe maybe in the past, that the chair or vice chair, I suppose, of the school committee used to have regular meetings, I guess as a group. There was a question about could we maybe start doing that again, having a school committee member, the superintendent, so we would join, say, the town, the administrator, just kind of have some regular meetings. That way we've got a nice relationship that kind of keeps going. And then for me, myself, one-on-one meetings with each of these selectmen. I really enjoyed the one-on-one conversations, and I'd ask them if this could be an ongoing thing. And they seemed to like that idea, maybe every month or every 6 weeks. Better town meeting preparation came up. There was a feeling that we should be able to answer questions a little better than we did this year. And that also, not only, it's not just with the school administration, but even the school committee. For us agreeing with ourselves to be able to jump up at the mic and be prepared to answer questions. And let me just make sure here. And then when we actually do the budget presentation to the Board of Selectmen, I noticed this last year, and I haven't followed it every single year, but I also noticed at one point we had a school committee member there in the past, and I would like to recommend that we do that going forward, so that one of us, so it's not just, it's Katie and Scott and then a school committee member. That way, you've got 3 people at that table. So that was something else we talked about. And then community forums, again, we've talked about the 3, but just coming up with some topics or just having an open forum. There were some special education concerns by a couple of them that just, which I can certainly maybe have a conversation with Scott, and, if Melissa needs to come in, we'll talk about whatever. And then the vaping concerns, which I brought up last time. But I think that was pretty much the highlight. It was a really, really nice meetings, and they're all very open, and I really just want to have a good relationship going forward. We're not always going to agree on everything, but at least if we can make it a bit more civil and kind of work toward maybe some early steps of maybe heading some things off at the pass, so it's not like at the last minute. So that was kind of a goal. Any questions about that? And we can certainly share more in our finance subcommittee. Yes?
I was just wondering, the community forum on the budget, which I think is, we kind of do that, we just don't call it a community forum. And my question is more, are they talking about before we have our budget made, or are they talking about after we start the budget process, here we're going to review the whole budget, because we kind of already do that?
I think the question, one of the things Harwich did last year that got a really good turnout is, because they had questions about their budget. Mm-hmm. And so they invited the finance director to, or I guess that's her title, she actually came in and did a forum. So she presented, and really it was more, she talked about the budget, but it was more from an educational, like what some of these terms mean, and if it's applied to this, what does that mean? So it was kind of more of an educational thing.
So not necessarily FY '21 budget-specific community forum, just this is what a school budget does
Yeah.
forum.
Yes, yeah, and I think it could probably be both. Another question that came up, now that you've just reminded me, when we present in our school committee, we call it a hearing, but is it really a hearing? Because I was observing last year that it might be a presentation, and do we give the public? I think that was a question of confusion as well.
So,
Yes.
the public hearing it's a separate from this meeting. So the public hearing, typically, we've in the past, held it as a meeting just before this meeting. And because it's the public hearing, do the entire budget presentation, so that anybody who happens to show up, which there's usually very few, get to see the entire budget presentation. And then, yes, it's a open forum for them to come up and ask questions, and it's not our school committee meeting. It's just a presentation where they are allowed to do and ask whatever. Whereas then, once that public hearing is closed, and then we start our regular business meeting, that's our meeting that we follow our protocols
Okay.
with. So that's just, there are two different elements to the budget.
Okay,
It's
Yeah, that's-
listed as a public hearing. It's
okay.
one of the sections on page
Yeah,
6.
on the
Yeah, that's a
regional-
legal
regional agreement.
requirement.
Yeah, yeah, and because a question, I guess when we did ours last year, it was just, I guess, observation.
nobody
Yeah,
here.
Exactly.
That's,
And yeah, and that was the thing, and so I guess, maybe we just publicize it more, I guess, I don't know why
It's-
people don't come,
it's
but yeah,
public, it's legally has to be
right,
posted in the local newspapers and posted online and put in the town halls and in the libraries that we're holding a public hearing.
right. And this
The only
came
thing
up,
we don't do is pass it out to our neighbor. Like, I compare it to somebody who's doing a construction project, and you have to give notification to all your
Right.
neighbors. We don't give notification to all our neighbors, but we do everything else. So it's publicized that it's happening
okay.
in newspapers.
Okay. And just as an aside, Meredith and I attended the course on Saturday, and this was actually a topic that came up with a lot of school committee members, because there was a lot of confusion
yeah.
on what it means to have a hearing. So, yeah, okay. That makes sense. Any comments, questions, other than what Nancy shared?
Just
Yes.
if I could echo,
Yep.
if we somehow target every 2 or 3 months, these 3 public forum meetings that we've talked about, the public community hearing that we, by law, necessary to set up, and I agree, regardless of how much we publicize it, seems to have a narrow scale of people that come. If we get off the mark in another month and a half with a public forum, open agenda meeting, during the next 3 or 4 months, we can, in our 2 meetings prior to that, advertise the fact that we need, hopefully, that same group of 30 or 45 community members who will attend these, I'm being optimistic, sessions, would make a mark on some calendar that they'd show up for a public hearing, rather than have a 5th meeting on the budget, so.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Sharon?
So, I'm not sure, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and I don't know how long a budget meeting would be and how many people would want to come to that. And it might be that we could think of if there might be something else we want to do that evening. That
Okay.
might bring other people there that might also listen to the budget. It'd be really there for school safety or something, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Thank you for that. Joanne?
So, here's what I've heard. There's a conversation about forums, and I think the one we had last year was really quite successful. I thought there was a good conversation there. And I think that's a good idea. And then you talked about one-on-one meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and then you talked about once a month going to the Board of Selectmen
Mm-hmm.
for
Yes.
meetings. It seems like at those different forms of communication, maybe is what I'll say, it's mentioned every single time, that this is the date for it, this is, we're gonna present it, and it is a forum in the sense that, although it's a hearing, can we say that? Although it's a hearing, there's a conversation.
It can be, sorry.
No.
It can be a conversation. So if I remember correctly, we're not, as school committee members, required to attend the public hearing. It's I could have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure we're not, because it's not our meeting. It's not a school committee meeting. It's a public hearing of the budget where the budget's presented. It's always posted as an agenda because we always come and we always have a quorum. And I could be wrong, and I'm pretty sure it's not our meeting. The chair calls it to order, I think. Maybe the chair
Go back and look.
calls
Yeah.
it to order. So maybe it is, but I'd have to look up all the
Okay.
legal stuff about it. I
Yeah,
don't-
yeah, we could take a look, because I think it is a little
But I know that
confusing.
it's
Yeah.
meant to be a conversation, and then I wanna say even the beginnings of Monomoy, we used to hold the public hearing the same night we voted, which isn't the most effective, because the whole point is to have the conversation, and we've changed that subsequently in the last several years, because it's supposed to be, okay, well, here is the public's thoughts and recommendations, and then we take that information and we might adjust our budget based on that, talking back and forth. So it's like I said, it's meant to be a formal meeting. I keep saying formal meeting because of the way the tables are.
Right.
It's meant to be a presentation and questions.
Okay,
So maybe it's the way we word it, that it's a conversation.
right.
Yeah, hearing sounds pretty
Well, it has
much-
to be, that's in the regional
That's,
agreement,
you
so.
have to say that. Somehow figure out how to put in the idea.
Public forum for the budget? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Public forum.
Yeah,
Hearing.
I think, and Sharon, I see your hand, I think the question, and again, this was just coming from their observations, I
Right.
think, I could poke around and see what other questions in the community, but I think there was a question of, did the community have an opportunity to ask questions? And I think whatever the perception was, it was a presentation with nobody asking questions, so that was
Because
kind of.
nobody was here.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And it
That's
seemed-
fair,
yeah,
and I think
right.
it is important that
Yeah.
you do have the questions.
Right,
Certainly helps us to see it from a different perspective.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly, making sure, yeah, everybody understands. Sharon?
So I think Nancy brought up some really good points, and one of them that, one of the aspects she just mentioned was, even though this isn't something that would be a school committee meeting, I think to be on the safe side, it's good if we can post it and go through that, because
Oh, always.
Yes.
if there are more of us there and we want to say something, I think we could run into trouble
Exactly. Yep.
otherwise.
Yep, that would be true. Yeah, the open meeting law, again, fresh off charting the course. Yes, the open meeting law, absolutely. If we're gonna be there as school committee members talking and asking, or answering questions, we do have to have a public meeting posted, yes. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? The other thing I was gonna throw out, and I don't know if they have this in Chatham, but Harwich has a voter information committee. And I had an idea that we might even solicit their help a little bit, because they assist with some of these forums and do a lot of publicizing and that sort of thing. So I wanted to just throw that and maybe tap in a little bit to their resources and woman power, because it's a committee of 5 women, and maybe see if we can't just, partner with them in some way, just as an information service around the budget. So anyway, just an idea. All right, so moving on, I don't think there's a vote there, it's just a conversation. The next item is the superintendent's report. Looks like you have 2 items that you want to touch on.
Oh, I've got a few others I'll throw in too.
Oh, okay.
We have time.
Yes, we do, as long as you can.
First of all, I just want to let folks know, in your packets, there's a letter from the Commissioner of Education. If you recall, we needed to get this committee's approval to lease spaces for our early childhood education with the Y and with Head Start. We also needed the Selectmen's approval, and we ultimately needed to get the Commissioner's approval. So we have all of those. So I'm just providing you a copy of the letter. I have been meeting with the high school's peer leaders to work with them in preparation for them presenting to their peers and to the parent community the results of the youth risk behavior survey that students took at the end of last school year. We have flyers that have gone out just advertising for the event. So it's going to be Monday, October 7th at 6:30 in the high school auditorium. Principal Burkhead shared that with all of the parents that came on curriculum night last week. I also provided for you sort of a one-page highlights of some of the trends. There's about 100 slides in the slide deck that the kids will present, but some of the topics covered and some of the trends. Monomoy High School students' use of tobacco is well below state and national averages and continues to decline, but their vaping use has risen rapidly above both state and national averages. Monomoy teens' use of marijuana has increased since 2016 and is above their peers in Massachusetts and the U.S. Our high school students' use of alcohol, on the other hand, is well below state national averages, but interestingly, though, if you really look at the data, despite having lower use of alcohol in the last 30 days, we actually have higher frequencies of teens that binge drink. Monomoy student drivers are far less likely than their peers in Massachusetts to get behind the wheel of a car after drinking. The percentage of students who report in this past administration of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey report having had sexual intercourse in their lifetime has increased by an alarming 43% over the past 3 years. And the percentage of Monomoy students who report having had unwanted sexual contact has dropped by 30% since 2014, but still impacts a shocking number of our girls. And lastly, the reports of self-harm and suicidal ideation have decreased significantly in the past years and quite significantly over the last administration of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. But of great concern is that the number of our teens who report being depressed, and on the survey question, they define it as, feeling sad or hopeless for 2 or more weeks in a year, to the point that you stop doing, regular things. The reports of feeling depressed since 2016 is actually up 50% for our teens. So, that's concerning that we have so many that are feeling that way. So lots to unpackage, and one of the things that I emphasize to folks is that this is a lot of these behaviors are things that don't happen just at school. With there's over 180 days that the kids are at home, and things that are happening outside of the school hours. But it's how can we work together with parents to hopefully decrease risk for our teens? I don't know. I'll sort of pause there if people have questions before I go on to one last little piece of information.
Any questions?
So I think the way we will be presenting the data to the students this year is actually having the peer leaders record sort of their snippet of the presentation. So somebody who'll be doing a presentation on marijuana, or another student. There's 10 different students that'll be sort of giving their piece of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We'll actually be working with Stephen Cass here and recording those and broadcasting their presentations with the slides being projected into each of the classrooms, so that so that the teachers then will be given, some sort of conversation questions to have, to sort of open up a dialogue with students immediately following the presentation, which we thought would be a little more conducive to open the dialogue, rather than in the past years, we've had, all 600 kids in the auditorium getting the presentation at once, and then you have this sort of awkward ability to, kind of, sort of transition into a conversation afterwards. Last thing, in your packet, the accountability ratings for schools and the MCAS data came out this past Tuesday, I believe. And Mark will go do a presentation of the MCAS scores. We'll send you, sort of a summary of where we stand on our MCAS scores. But I think one of the things that I anticipate Mark will do at our next meeting is not only provide you the MCAS scores that you can look up online, but also I think really in mirroring how we are looking at the strategic plan, break out some of those scores to look at our sort of high-risk groups and our vulnerable populations and how they're performing relative to others. So I put in your packet the accountability ratings for school districts and for schools across the Cape. Based on the accountability ratings, it's safe to say that Monomoy is number one. So we have the highest accountability rating of any pre-K through 12 school district on Cape Cod. That's bolstered by the middle school continues to have the highest accountability rating of all middle schools on Cape Cod. Harwich Elementary has one of the highest accountability ratings of the 24 elementary schools on Cape Cod that get ranked. And that really helps bolster the school district's overall accountability rating. But to try to understand what's behind an accountability rating, it's rather like advanced calculus, and every year it gets a little more complicated. So
That's why I like it.
So the rating is based on 40% weighting of the points you got last year, plus 60% weighting of the points that you got this year. Then within any one of those years, 50% of your points are weighted for the whole group of students that you have, and 50% of your points are weighted for the lowest performing students in your district, your lowest performing 25% of the students in your school. So you have, there's become an increased emphasis on making sure that we're elevating everybody, not just the highest students. Then you get points for how your achievement is on ELA MCAS test, on the overall mathematics scores, the science scores, but then growth in ELA and in math. Then you have for high schools, you have how many are graduating, what's your graduation rate, and what are your dropout rates. Then you have scores based on how well you are with bringing your English language learners to English proficiency. Then you have scores for chronic absenteeism, so what percentage of your students are being absent 1 out of 10 school days or more. What percent, and then also what percentage of your students at the high school level are taking advanced coursework. So the state has this mathematical formula that they crank everything out in to sort of determine a district's overall accountability rating, and it's based on how much you are moving forward, and based on their ratings, our school district is moving the ball forward the most out of all the pre-K through 12 districts on the Cape. So we are officially number one.
Wonderful. Okay, yes, yes, Terry?
Kind of a suggestion, and it ties in with a couple of our topics, going back to the idea of creating 3 public forums during the season, call them fall, winter, spring. I like the idea, as Joanne said, having an open agenda. We were kind of semi-tripped over one last year. It seemed to work out, I think, well, for a lot of reasons. I would think before our next meeting in a couple of weeks that the Tina or Jackie and our superintendent meet and somehow start to project reasonable dates that would target. Secondly, even though I like the idea of open agenda, someone should begin to gather, I have a couple of suggestions, key fall topics that we want to tell these 20 or 40 or 50 folks. One of which, in my mind, would be this high-risk report, even if it's a second night. Secondly, I would think an update as to what we have been doing, and not necessarily just from Scott, but maybe what we had as a presentation 2 weeks ago on vaping. It seems to be Cape-wide and statewide. I noticed where the governor is putting a shutdown on all vendor stores selling the equipment. And lastly, as complicated as this is, if in the next 4 or 5 weeks we can simplify it, either with Mark or yourself, to that forum. So those are 3 topics I think right at the moment would be thrown in during an open agenda just to get the ball rolling.
Joanne?
Also, what the parents are speaking about, what they're concerned about, and what the community is concerned about, should go into that mix, I think.
Yes.
That's what started the forum
Right,
last
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
exactly. Sharon, did you have something?
Well, I agree with what Terry said and Joanne said. What Terry said, I think, basically tells what our product is of our kids in risk, what progress we're making with our academics. I forget what the other one was. But those, I think, are really important. Plus, you know, I don't know what else parents might be concerned about, but certainly principals may know what those are, or guidance counselors.
Right. Anybody else? I happen to agree, you know, with what you said. I mean, the MCAS, I think, it's hard to understand. You just compared it to advanced calculus, and I think it's, you know, that is a big question out in the community when somebody sees a MCAS score. That they just see the score. They have no context behind how the score came to be. And I just know that with our middle school in particular, I mean, we're doing something right over there. I'm really curious about what's happening, because those scores are really good, and I think you know, we'd like to tell people why, you know, so maybe that is a good topic, because that's always something everybody is looking at is MCAS scores. You know, they just are. So that's a very good topic. Anything else? Did I see another hand? All right, thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. So we are moving into action items. So we have our school committee goals, which this is for a vote. We had the final read at the last meeting, and I think we made all the changes, corrected all the misspellings, and, oh, it looks like, okay, Joanne.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Well, so I read them, thinking, I have to do this, so I should know what I'm doing. And I looked at number 4, and I really didn't know what it wanted me to do. I didn't know, am I on the right one? Yeah. The one that says expand communication with the Board of Selectmen and community.
Yes?
And it says, we'll seek opportunity to communicate. I just was confused by that. So anyway, I rewrote it because it's easier. And here's what I came up with, and I'd just like you to think about it. I changed nothing except revised, that's all. And I wrote, MRS will engage with the community to advocate for Monomoy Regional District's initiatives. MRSC will share accurate and consistent information with regard to district performance, policy, and budget. Communication will be achieved through webpage, public announcements, and MRS bi-monthly meetings. Further, a designated member or members will attend meeting of school and community organizations. And then I just reduced it to C would be work and D, create a subcommittee, create a subcommittee to identify organizations and meeting times of key stakeholders, which is what we were just talking about. Presentation by subcommittee to MRSC in January 2020, determine attendance at identified meetings. So it just was, just get rid of a lot of the wordiness and know exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
And I don't think it's different than what, I don't, I know it's hard to wordsmith when you have a whole group together, but it's just clarification, so I don't know what you want to do
Okay.
with that. I had sent this in and suggested it be on the agenda for clarification.
Oh, okay, and did you send that to Jackie?
I did,
Okay.
I did. But it's not earth-shaking and it doesn't change anything, so
Okay. Joe?
now it's in your lap.
I would just speak briefly in favor of what was suggested. I would just make one quick point. To some extent, we've already surpassed some of the expectations. In August 2019, we started working on this, and for instance, in item 4, we're going to seek opportunities to communicate and engage. And if anyone, for everybody who was paying attention, and hopefully it's more than anyone, for everybody who was paying attention, we just heard a subcommittee report that was well beyond seeking an opportunity to communicate with the Board of Selectmen. The communication has already begun, is well underway, is favorably received, and the boat is out of the slip, out of the harbor, and heading out into the open sea. So some of this we can, I think, revise, what was the word, wordsmith a bit and tighten up. But I am concerned that on the first, on hearing somebody read something, you may not be certain of what it just said. It might be better to have it in writing. So I'm personally more than happy to vote in favor of what I just heard, and I'm not at all interested in quarreling with anybody who says, wait a second, I just heard that, I need a little more time, I need to see it in writing. Having been a teacher, we know about visual learners, auditory learners. I want to attend to different learning styles, assuming that they exist on the school committee as well as in the schools.
Yes, I would agree with that. Sharon?
I'm that person that needs it, and then, so I would like to have what it says here and the other proposal that Joanne says, and to look it over and think about it for discussion at next, not voting, but discussion at next meeting. I honestly think for this, we might want to do a very short workshop, like before a meeting or something, to try to figure out much more specifically what we would like to do, rather than take a lot of time on this.
You mean for the writing of this, is that what you're saying?
Not, well, it would inform the writing, but like, what are some of the ideas we have? And does this reflect them?
Right. Well, I think we had a workshop in August, which is where this was created from. So I think that part has been done, and now it was just basically getting it in writing and that we're all on the same page and these are our goals.
Okay.
So I think, does anybody have a comment about that? So,
I have
I
it.
would just echo
yeah,
Joanne's comment. It didn't register to me where the major switch or distinction is in your suggestions, although I'd be more in favor. I just feel that it's gonna be October, and we spent 2 or 3 or 4 hours in August and a couple of revisions. So if we're that close, I would like to, let's consider it and let's vote on this the next school committee meeting. I don't, even item 4, I see it captures what we were thinking in August, the way it is. But I'm open to Joanne having you put it in writing and see if it sings out to us. But I would just not continue to discuss something we find out vote on Thanksgiving.
okay. Nancy?
Well, I actually, I feel very heavy-handed, but I think that we're out of order and sort of, we're supposed to actually, because it's not up for discussion, we're only supposed to be voting on it.
Okay.
So we can't really even discuss anything until we have a motion and a second, and then we can have discussion on
Okay,
it.
thank you for that.
So I'll make
Okay.
a motion to approve the school committee meeting goals as presented.
All right, a second, please.
I would second it.
All right,
Okay.
all in favor?
No, no, no,
Oh,
no,
oh,
no,
sorry,
no, no.
thank you.
Any discussion?
Now we have
And then
discussion.
So then we can say that
Right.
Joanne had her discussion, and she brought up her discussion, if, as the chair, would be amendable to that.
Okay, so, all right, so you brought that up, and it sounds like Joe, okay, so just so I'm understanding, so is Joanne making a motion to accept with her
No,
revisions?
she's just
Okay.
having a discussion about it.
Okay,
So she had a discussion, and then, but that's the way I took it, is that
Yeah.
you wanted to have a discussion about it. And so then, can I make a comment now?
yes, please.
So, listening to what you said, I also need to read things over. It's not necessarily spending a lot of time on it, but hearing it, I need to be able to read it and hear it at the same time. I'm a both learner. Being that it's not substantially different, I think you're saying the exact same things. And I think that if you are comfortable with the fact that you are saying the exact same things, we can have that as a descriptor of what we're doing in this. And I also agree with Terry that these are our school committee goals for the 19-20 school year, and if we wait until our next meeting to discuss it, that would be our first reading, and then we would have to wait till the end of October to vote on it, would be our voting, and then we only have 2 months left in 19, so it would actually be pretty much our 2020 school committee goals. So respectfully, I would ask that because it is the same, I didn't hear any like additional changes in what you were saying from what is actually in here. I think that if we move forward with these goals, and then if we find a need to revise them, I don't think there's a problem to revise them and say, you know what, instead of scheduling and attending community forum 3 times throughout the year, we say, you know what, we're gonna schedule and attend 5 community forums, not that we're limited to only 3. Or maybe we decide we only are gonna have 2 community forums, and we're going to consider the public hearing, and then we're also gonna do a review of the accountability ratings. However, maybe we revise them once we kind of get more into the weeds. So I would prefer, because it's not substantially different, to just, and we've kind of hashed these out over several meetings,
Right.
to go ahead and vote on these and revise as needed.
Okay, so that sounds to me like you would like to make a motion that we do that?
We already have a
We
motion
already
and a
have motion.
second.
Thank
We're
you. Thank you. We
discussing.
have a second?
We're discussing.
All right, so we're discussing, yes, Joanne?
And I'm okay with that because there's nothing that I changed that's measurable.
Right.
So we're okay, we're still
Okay.
with our goals. I do think, I don't know if I can say this, but I do think we need to look at documents when we write them rather than trying to wordsmith with 8 people, that maybe there should be just a little subcommittee that sits down and goes over things so that
Oh, for
they're
the
clear.
initial creation?
For the initial creation, that would not
Right.
at this moment. And it doesn't change anything, so I really don't have a problem with
Okay,
it.
and, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you sent them to Jackie, and I know maybe she just didn't get to it, and I know she's been trying to keep up with this,
She's had
so,
a little
Not
bit
a,
hectic.
Yeah.
not a problem.
okay.
Not
All
a
right, so we
problem.
have a motion, and a second, so all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any
We're
abs-
just approving this.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's fine.
so you, was that an approval?
Yes.
You voted in favor, so nobody opposed and nobody's abstaining, is that correct? Wonderful, then this moves on and we will revise as needed, thank you. And I think, let me get back to my agenda, presentation of warrants, they have been presented this evening for signature, so that is happening. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, meeting is adjourned. Karen?
Good job.